All right, so databases, how to use databases with MVC or API, right? So whatever I'm going to be teaching now, we can still use it for API, but I'm going to be using MVC based on what we already have, right? So now let's do it this way, right? I mentioned that we should download and install, let me see, SQL Server and SSMS, right? So if you've done that, you should be able to start SSMS, that's SQL Server Management Studio on your PC, which I'm going to start now. So just wait for it to come up. All right, so this is mine, right? So if I click on Connect, database engine and Windows authentication, if I click on Connect, I'll be able to see the databases already existing on my, let me solve this. I see there are databases already existing on my system, right? So already have all of this, right, that I've either worked on or still work on, right? And normally I could use this to create a new database and then create a table inside of that database, create the roles and all of that, right? But with .NET, we have an object relational mapper called Entity Framework. What is an ORM? Oh shit, give me a second. Object relational mapper, that's the short form of ORM. Yeah, so object relational mapping, the technique that lets you query and manipulate data from a database using object-oriented paradigm. When talking about ORM, most people are referring to a library that implements the object relational mapping technique, hence the phrase ORM. So for .NET, we have one called Entity Framework, right? So you have your object in your code, and then you want to use that to map to your database so that you can use your objects to either manipulate the data in the database or query the data in the database, right? I'm just going to Google on Entity Framework Core. So if you come to this link, you get a lot of details about Entity Framework Core and how it is used, right? Getting started, DB contests, creating a model, and all of this other stuff, querying data, saving data. You get a lot of information on this documentation. However, I'm going to show you the simplest way to use this in your code, right? Then with Entity Framework Core, you could create your database immediately from code. That's one advantage of using Entity Framework Core. You can create your database immediately from code. So what that means is you don't have your database here, but with your code, your database can be created. And that process is called code first approach. Code first approach. Right? So the ASP.NET MVC framework, the code first approach is a development model where you first write the code that creates the data access layer, then you write the code that creates the controllers and the view. So basically, you don't have a database, but with your code, your database can be created. You can do that with Entity Framework. But then Some other persons need to have a lot of control over their database, the structure and all of that. And then they create that database first and use that to create the data access layer of their code. So that means they work in probably SQL Server, create a database, create a table, create all of the properties that they need. And then from there, they use that to create the data access layer, the model and everything. You could also do that using entity framework call, and that's called database first approach. Yeah, so you have an existing database, you want to use that to create your data access layer and your models. That is also possible, right? But for this training, we're going to be teaching you code first approach. We're going to be teaching you code first approach, and maybe later on I'll just show you an example of database first approach. All right. So for code first approach, what are we going to do? I'm going to bring up this should be it. Let me open this code. So I'm going to bring up the project that we've been working on for some time now.
Hello, Greg.
Yes, please.
Yes, I want to ask, what's the advantage of a code first approach and over the database approach?
The advantage is you don't need to disturb yourself about the database. You can just configure everything with your code. But then the advantage of database first is you would probably get a lot more control over your data. This thing. How do I put this now? Let me see. Let me open. No. Not this guy. Let me open this guy. Okay, so this, if you check the design of this language, there are a lot of rules that you could, specify with the database, and then their relationship and all of those stuff, right? That's if you're constructing the database first without the code, right? So the advantage of using database first approach is you have a lot more control over how the design of your database would be, the rules and regulation guiding it and all of that, right? That's most people use the database first approach when they have a data administrator. I think that's what they are called. People who work with the database a lot, database administrator or something like that, right? But if you do not have that, you could just quickly create your database with some of the basic rules that would eventually still work for you if you're probably working on a simple project, right? If you're not working on a very huge project, then you could just use a code first approach. All right, so back to our code. We already have a model called user data, right? And this is called first name, last name, location, phone number, email, right? So what if I want to create a table of this in our database, right? What I want to do is I would also need to add a key of ID. So this is going to be our primary key that we're going to be using to identify. We're going to be using to identify the the properties in the database. So basically, you can get all the properties or all the values in the database. But then if you wish to get one of them, you could use the ID to identify it, because the ID is like the primary key, and it's unique, right? So no two properties or values in the database will have the same ID, right? So I need to add that there. So that's the first thing I need to do. The second thing is I need to install some of those packages. They are called NuGet packages, right? I need to install some of them, and the codes have already been written for us. All we need to do is install them, right? So I'll click on CS Proj, because when I install them, they're going to be registered in the CS Proj. So that's one. Now I need to go to nuget.org. All right, so here I can search different packages and install them in my .NET application, right? So some of those packages, you could write them yourself, but they've already been written for you, and then all you need to do is just install them. So what I need is entity framework core. Right, so I need this guy, that's one. I need design. So design is going to help us design our database. That's two. Then I need SQL Server. SQL Server is going to help us. It's going to specify that we're using SQL Server as our database store, right? So I need those three. Previously, we needed to install tools, but then right now you can install tools on your system, right? So let me just Google that, how to install .NET AF. Yeah, so yeah, so you need to install it globally on your system, right? Using using this command. So I'm going to drop this command. If you've not installed tools on your system before now, you need to install it on your system. So let me even see. Let me see if I can get the version of my tools and update it. .NET to -- version. Okay, basically not that. So that's true. I need to check it. Anyways, no problem. Let me just pass in this. Then it says it's already installed. I wanted to see if I can update it. You know what? So you need this. I'm going to put it in the chat box. You need to install tools on your system. Well, I need to update my tool. So how to update .NET tool. I just typed in -- version just now. Okay, I probably need to figure this out later. Maybe it's my PC. All right, so, but you need to install .NET Tools. I'll figure this out later. I already have it installed. I just wanted to update it. Okay, moving on. Yeah, so we need this Microsoft.entityframework.core.SQL Server. So I'll just come here, copy this. But the version I need is the latest .NET 5 version. So that would be 5.0.17. So I'll come here, create an item group. Then change this to 5. Come on. 5.0.17. Okay, so now I would restore, restore. So when I click on restore, it updates my projects to contain this NuGet package that I just installed. That is one way to install a NuGet package. Another way is through the .NET CLI, just type this command, .NET add package, then the name of the package, and then the version of the package, right? Because I'm using .NET 5, the version I'm going to be using is this latest 5.07. If I was using .NET 6, I'll be using 6.0.8. .NET 7 is already coming, so basically, if you're using any of the preview of .NET 7, you use this most latest ones. So yeah, store, and I'll come back here, .NET Microsoft.Entity Framework Core.Design. So I'll package reference, copy this. I think the latest version should be 5.0.17. Yeah. Okay, great. So 5.0.17. Click install. Then the last one, I'm going to close this. Then the last one would be Entity Framework Core. So I'm going to come to the package reference, copy this, then I'll still use 5.0.17. Right. 5.0.17. Stop. All right, so done 0 means it has restored and then it has registered these 3 projects as part of our projects, right? So we can now use these 3 projects. So to use them, the first thing we need to create is something called a database context. So I'm going to create a folder. I'm going to call this folder database context. So it's going to house our database context class, right? So the database context class is like the class that is connecting our projects to the database, right? So it kind of links our project to the database, the tables to the models and all of that. You're going to see how that works. So what I need to do is I'll create a new class and I'm going to call it app DB context. All right. So this class is going to be our database context. I would inherit from a class called DB context. This class is inside of Entity Framework Core. So I need to bring in that user statement called Microsoft.entityframework.core, right? So then the error leaves. Then I need to create a constructor. Remember when we're talking about constructor, constructor is the method that is first initialized or that is first created, or we have 10 more minutes. The constructor is a class that is first, or it's a method that is first triggered when you initialize that class, right? So what do we want to be triggered? We want a DB context option DB context options of our class, which is our DB context. And then we need to name it something. So in this case, I'm going to name it options. Then we'll have to send it to the base class and pass that options to it, right? So this structure that you see right now is the same like all over every DB context, right? You don't need to be scared or anything. This structure, if I open any other file now and I need to create a DB context, this structure is the same across all DB contests. You need to do it like this. You need to inherit from DB context and then pass an options, that is DB context options of our class, and then pass it to the base options. These options can be renamed. I can call it A and then A, right? But it's just like saying string of A, right? So now the data type in this case is DB context options of our class, right? So the options could be anything, right? But this DB context options like the data type, and then we're passing it to the base. Base means we're passing these options to this DB context, because if we go into this DB context, you see that it has, so it has a constructor that is accepting DB context options of options, right? So we need to send that option into this constructor. Then it would use it for whatever. Basically, that is how this entity framework call was constructed. When you're using DB context, you have to pass in the options of the class that you're using it inside. So if the class is just, if the class is application DB context, if the class is app DB context, if it's also DB context or whatever, you need to pass DB context of that class to the base. And that's what we're doing here. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to create a DB sets. DB sets is like telling us that, okay, we want to create a table of this class. And that class in this case is user data, right? So it's asking for where that user data is. So it's in Wola MVC or modules, right? Then we need to give that table a name, right? User data is actually a singular and plural word. So what can I use now? So I'll probably call it user data table, right? So now, once we try to create a table, it's going to create a table called user data table, and then everything, all the columns that will be inside that table will be whatever we're seeing inside of user data. That's ID, first name, last name, location, phone number, email, and then they're going to have all of these requirements, right? All of these rules guiding it, like ID will be a key, first name will always be required, so that means cannot be null and all of that rules. So we've done all of this now. We've done all of this now. The next thing we need to do is Sorry, mistake. So next thing we need to do is, this guy is complaining. Okay, yeah. So next thing we need to do is we need to create something called connection string. We need to create something called connection string, right? So connection string is like a string that helps connect our app to the database, right? So when your app is looking for the database, there is something called connection string that gives details as to where the database is. So it gives details as to where the database is. Now, this is how you come to app settings.development.json or app settings, anywhere you want to put it. But if you're working on your local, you can put it in the app settings.development.json. And right here, we're going to type in connection strings, colon, curly brace. So this is a JSON file, right? I don't know if we've seen a JSON file before. That's JavaScript object notation, right? This is a JSON file, and inside of it, we can put secrets. It's not safe to put our secrets here most times, right? But since we're just starting out, we can put our secrets here, right? So we would need to name the connection string. So I'm going to call it default because it's just one. Then inside of there, I'm going to pass our connection string. So I'm going to get my connection string from a different app. Give me a quick second. Let me see. All right, so this is my connection string. I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to paste it inside of here, then I'll explain it a bit, right? So it says server and then gives this URL. So that means that the server should have a link, right? I'm going to disconnect this and try to connect again. So you see this server name, that is your server. So anytime you're trying to create a connection string to your database, your server should always be this server name, right? So for mine, this is it, but for yours, it could be something else. So you need to copy that and paste that in the server part of the link. So that is this. Then database, give it a database name. So whatever I want to call the database, so I could call it Wella School DB, right? So when we are creating the database, it's going to create a database called Wella School DB before creating a table called user data table, which is what we suggested here, user data table. This will be the table and this will be the database. Trusted connection is true, multiple active results set is true. So that is just default. You could leave those as the same, but these two things, you have to change them on yours. You have to give it the server of your SQL server and the server name of your SQL server and then the database name of your database. Basically, we're done with this part. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to now register all of this in the startup. So this is our startup, right? When the program is running, remember when I explained that when this program is running, it runs the program.cs first, and then this method is run. Inside this method, it says that we're using startup. So after running this, it runs the startup and then, sets up every dependency that we need, every configuration that we need, and all of that. It sets everything up before it's sets everything up before running the program. Can you please give me a quick second? I need to set up somewhere else. That place is a bit noisy.